Welcome to episode 5 of Hacker Practice. I am Justice Epen, and I'll be your host today. In this episode, I interview nuclear systems engineer Andrew Dodson. Now, Andrew is working right now at a stealth energy startup, so we don't really get into the business side of things, but we do get into the technical side, and we talk about a few things, ranging from extreme laser tag and the future of that potential sport in space, all the way through molten salt reactors to designing nuclear systems at home, or how to get started designing nuclear systems at home using free open source tools. And finally, the second half of our conversation is really focused around what would be required to build a nuclear power plant in your backyard. So we get into all this and more, and it's a really great episode, one of my favorites in season 1. So please enjoy this episode of Hacker Practice with Andrew Dodson. How are you doing today, Andrew?
Hey man, it's a beautiful Monday morning here in Boston, crisp and cold.
It's actually slightly afternoon at this point.
It's slightly afternoon now. Correct.
Great. And tell me where you are. Tell me, what you're doing right this second.
Sitting here in an office in Cambridge, temporary for now. Gonna be getting a more permanent office situation in February. Let's see, what am I doing now? Just set up. Cracked open the laptop to talk to you. Got a systems engineering handbook next to me. A desk covered in papers. It's a Monday.
You've always got good books laying around, and we'll dive into books later in the discussion.
Okay, speaking about books, I used to be far more of a reader than I am now. Ever since that guy has gotten on YouTube, the Porsche Lamborghini guy, and he's like looking at this wall of books, I'm almost like that made me want to read less. It's like reading became pretentious.
So Ty Lopez has come up on this podcast a couple of times now, and it's never good. I'm the only person that likes Ty Lopez.
Don't read and drive. That's what this guy is promoting, reading and driving. Anyways, yeah, security. Go on, I guess, into the first. Well,
no, I want to know. Do you remember how we met?
Okay. This. I was really trying hard to think about this in the shower. Wasn't it some kind of wearable device? You wanted to do like a battery in a jacket or something?
Oh,
like in the fabric or something? Am I remembering correctly?
So. On this podcast, I like to give away all my best ideas, and this is literally one of my best ideas. I can't get over it. Extreme laser tag.
Extreme laser tag.
Right? So I wanted to make a wetsuit that had shock circuits on the inside that were basically like TENS units that could deliver continuous shock to your limbs and body at any location. And then I wanted to put like graphene panels or some sort of scale-looking photodiodes on the outside of the wetsuit so that you could get localized laser detection. And so I came to you because you introduced yourself as a nuclear physicist, and I was like, oh, you might know enough about how light works to help me with this localized photon detection, because it's not really a solved problem yet. And so we were talking about graphene and different optics technologies and like who I need to talk to. And
right. And then this is similar to another thing I had done before, where like basically the cheap solution I think ended up being just get little photodiodes and just do them regularly and make sure that your laser beam kind of.
Well, we came up with I'll even draw it up right now.
There was some kind of a density of photodiodes over the suit that I think you could build. Yeah, I remember that, man. 2015, was that like November 2015 when you brought that up? You were in WeWork there.
That's
one of the first people I got to know over there, man. It was fun.
It was a couple years ago, and so the solution that we came to, because initially we were talking about, well, is there a way that we could put graphene in panels on the outside of the suits and then somehow detect the laser by using graphene? But that's cost prohibitive because graphene is like $200 per square millimeter.
Right.
And what we decided was we would put a photodiode on the end of a little piece of plastic that would look like a scale, like a a reptilian scale essentially. And so if you hit any part of the scale, the laser would, the light would funnel into the diode, and the diode would essentially, in a binary way, say, yes, this is a laser, or no, it's just some other kind of light. And then if you got shot in the arm with a laser, then the TENS unit would activate, and it would just start bleeding and like electricity into your arm to the point where you couldn't use your arm. And so this would just make the most fun game of laser tag ever, because it's essentially, paintball. It's like Ender's Game, actually, where you shoot someone and they get all like locked up, except it would hurt a lot more.
Well, you could adjust the level of pain. I mean, I'm sure you'd have people that would play it on extreme settings, because there's like, Jackass does exist.
Yeah.
But you could make a wider consumer audience.
Well, let's just jump into this real quick, because tell me that you would not.
That was a fun idea, man. I like that.
I mean, tell me you wouldn't pay, $250 a month, let's say, so that every weekend you could put on this suit, you could turn on your power pack. It's like an Iron Man style glowing thing. You have like a black helmet on, and like motorcycle helmet, and a black.
No, I think people. This is going to be the earliest form of space tourism. People are just going to go up into like low, medium Earth orbit just to play this game. It'll be like the coolest thing on ESPN. Right? Space laser tag.
Yeah.
If you go out of bounds, then you accidentally fall back to the Earth. So like you can't go too far down, right?
And then you're like a Felix Baumgartner, like plummeting to the ground at unimaginable speed with ridiculous.
It's like Gravity crossed with Ender's Game, the movie. Yeah, man.
Wow. So we're gonna do this one day. We're gonna work on extreme laser tag. So that was how we met, was trying to figure out how to do extreme laser tag.
Yeah.
At the time, you were working on.
This is Matthias. He's my co-research manager.
Oh, wow. Hello, Matthias.
This is a very well dressed entrepreneur. He's a thinking man. You'd want to work with him.
Matthias, you're actually on a podcast right now.
Yeah, we're on a podcast right now.
What's that?
Matthias is a super genius, man. We come to MIT to get these people. The MIT has them locked up in these buildings, dude. Like, they're like little gerbils waiting to get out and like conquer the world.
Well,
I just want to lure them out with like little pieces of cheese.
So they're gerbils, and you're like
they're
a mole
amazing. They'll work so hard.
That I have in MIT to help me get gerbils when I need them.
Gerbil, graduate gerbils, postdoctorate gerbils. Yes. Okay. All right. Let's go to some serious questions now.
Talk to me about the company or the business that you were in when we met, because you were essentially working on what would hopefully become the Apple of nuclear reactors.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds good. I'll probably be on this call for another 40 minutes.
Our guest is at work right now, so he's dealing with.
At 2? Yeah, we're going to go through the systems engineering documents we built. Yeah, I know exactly what we'll do. We'll just go through that part of the notes.
And right now,
sorry,
we are getting sensitive intellectual property on the
real
show.
Life, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So the company I was with when we first met, very interesting company. You learn a lot about what risks to take, and like, to have a high level of like personal security means you need to establish boundaries for yourself that you agree you don't cross, right? Like certain red flags. I mean, we do this in programming and all these things, right? You should do it in your life as well. Like if something gets kind of fishy and there's a lack of transparency, there's programs and faces that people are running, and you have to be confident enough in your ability to perceive these things that you can recognize like what's really going on. People show who they are in their face, It's amazing, like startups can be technically competent. They can be you can be top heavy, bottom heavy. If you've never run a company before and you just start like hiring all these really expensive sounding managers that like have all these like credentials, but you don't get any like grunts that do the work. You just have like PowerPoint fodder, right? It's just like faces that's like, these faces raise money, but you don't actually end up doing anything. You need real people, and in order to get real people, you have to be real people.
That's a really common problem, actually.
And real people, y'all ought to recognize that. Real people stand up. Real lives matter.
Talk to me about the technology, man. What were you building over there?
All these like foreigners at MIT, they just do these little like mouthwash cups of cappuccino all day long. That's it.
That's what he's drinking right now.
Sorry, ask the question again. I lost focus.
So okay, I was going to ask about the technology, but I am
the
curious.
technology.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a class of nuclear reactors that was initially conceptualized in the fury and whirlwind of the 1950s and 60s. This reactor is known as a molten salt reactor. Molten salts are phenomenal substances, right? What are the solids? What are the solids that we have? We have metals, right? Mm-hmm. We have covalent compounds. We have organic molecules, things like oils and fats and proteins, And then you have these ionic compounds, salts, oxides, chlorides, fluorides, carbonate salts, pH and all this stuff, right? So you have these different bonds. So these materials are really interesting in their solid phases, mm-hmm. as well as their liquid and gaseous phases, right? Liquid metals and liquid salts are two very different things. And liquid oils are different from liquid metals and liquid salts. Mm-hmm. A liquid salt being a salt that is at a high enough temperature to just not be dissolved in water, but to be liquid itself, okay? So a nuclear reactor using these kinds of fluids can have very high temperatures of operation at reasonable pressures. So something like sodium chloride, which melts at 800 degrees C, only boils above like 1600 C. So to imagine something that's at or below atmospheric pressure up to exceedingly high temperatures and able to have many other advantageous aspects, both in terms of heat transport and safety.
Okay, so this is interesting. What is the problem that you're solving is that what is the alternative to a molten salt reactor that would have high pressure?
Right. So the existing like water reactors are oxide fuels, oxide rods of solid fuel, and the coolant they use to keep these rods at, they have a peak temperature they can have, and so the rod has this nuclear reaction going in it, so it's all heating up. Mm-hmm. So there's a temperature gradient that occurs from the outside to the center line of that rod.
Because the inside's really hot where the reaction's taking place, and the outside.
Well, but the reaction's kind of happening through all of it, but heat has to flow out to the sides of the rod and then out into the water surrounding the rods.
Right, and so the water is a coolant.
Like a couple of layers. Right, because the water is the coolant. So you get this inherent limitation that this solid material, which is in fact an insulator, right? Like oxides, like rocks and things, aren't the best of heat conductors. I mean, there's a huge variation there.
The solid material that makes up the rod.
Right, it's not that great of a heat conductor. Mm-hmm. It's like a giant hot piece of chalk.
Okay, and it's made out of some sort of oxide.
Oxides of uranium.
Oh, okay. So that's where the uranium comes in. So the uranium makes up the rod. There's some sort of nuclear reaction taking place in the middle, or just throughout the rod.
It's a giant, right? So it's a giant nuclear water heater. But unlike maybe a coal-fired water heater or a gas-fired water heater, there's a certain temperature limitation that I can run in that reactor because that rod can only get so hot, right? Like if those rods could go up to like 4,000 degrees C, then I might be able to run the surface of them at like 600 or 700 degrees C.
Right.
But the middle of the rods can only go up to like 15 to 1600 degrees C.
Mm-hmm.
So the surface of the rod only gets down to maybe like 300, I guess 350 degrees C.
And what happens when it gets too hot?
So like you get this limitation, right? Like the best steam turbines that we have now that are running off of coal and natural gas are actually running off of steam up to like 600 degrees C. So in fact, nuclear reactors are kind of inherently limited to the temperature of heat they can produce when they're operating off of solid materials, right? Because this solid has to transfer heat out of it. Now, a liquid-fueled reactor that generates the heat in the coolant can inherently be more power dense, right? I have a ball and I pump fluid into this ball, and when it reaches a certain kind of radius, there's enough uranium atoms in one configuration to where the neutrons will support a chain reaction, right? In that volume. Okay?
So the neutrons will support a chain reaction within a given volume. So you have a big...
And density, right? Like, okay, what is the chain reaction going on here, right? A neutron hits uranium, and like so many times that will cause it to split and give off some more neutrons. Well, those neutrons have to travel a certain distance, right?
Yep.
And they're kind of bypassing tons of atoms, and they have to go past a huge number of atoms in order to have a chance of interacting with one, right? And they'll bounce off of them some of the time. So it's like, to think of there's got to be a minimum sort of sphere of uranium of a given quality for that to generate this kind of self-sustaining nuclear reaction. Right?
So talk me through it. You've got some sort of vessel that you're pumping, in this case, molten salt, which means salt that's really, really, really hot. And you're putting it into the vessel, and the pressure is causing...
So it'll be hot at one temperature, maybe going into the vessel at 400, 500, 600 degrees C, and coming out of the vessel at 700, 800, 900 or more degrees C.
Okay.
And so the steam that I can generate with that kind of temperature can do a lot more work. And in fact, I can get much smaller power conversion systems, much smaller heat exchangers, all sorts of things if I can go to systems that are high temperature. Now,
can you break down those two systems that you just mentioned for me, the conversion and the heat transfer?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by those?
Oh, so what is the power plant, right? It's not just enough to make heat. You want to have a core, a reactor, a boiler, a gas combustor, whatever my source of heat is, right? Mm-hmm. That source of heat generates a working fluid that spins a turbine, and then coming out of the turbine, I'll condense the fluid or I'll cool it off. That goes through a pump that pumps the fluid back into the heater, and you just loop around like that. And that's the basics behind how we spin large shafts in order to drive turbines and generate electricity.
So right? The idea is that the nuclear reaction produces heat. The heat heats up water. The water becomes steam. And the steam
for now, we use water, but there's other options in the future if we can go to better temperatures.
Better temperatures meaning higher temperatures at maintaining a low pressure so you don't crack the reactor.
Correct, right. Like if something's super hot and it's kind of soft and it's expanded, you want to baby it. So you don't want to sure, you'd love super high heat and super high pressure, but then, what is the risk occurring if something cracks, right? I'm going to spray like a bunch of people with like 900 degrees C, whatever, steam. That in itself is inherently dangerous, right? Steam coming out of these pressurized water reactors is so powerful that if a pipe cracks, you can't see it, but it will it'll cut you in half. And it can it steams so hot, it'll auto ignite things, right?
Yeah. And so that's what we're currently dealing with. That's
correct. Now of course, let's not denigrate light water reactors. They're super safe. In fact, the project I'm on now is light water reactors, and I would argue that water is an excellent heat transfer medium, and there's tons of ways to slice and dice like how you heat up different fluids in nuclear systems, and like it's hours and hours and days of like studying these things. They're really fun systems to make, right?
Yeah.
It's all really just a way to spin a pinwheel, right?
Ways to spin a pinwheel.
Right.
So
right. This is like there's humanity puts huge efforts into this, like amazing bearings and super duper blade interleavings and like all just to make go.
So if I wanted to do a experiment with these ideas at home, where would I start?
You would want to start at the level of computer simulations. There's a lot of really fun open source tools where you can run Monte Carlo simulations. And a Monte Carlo simulation actually, it basically rolls the dice,
right?
And it lets you model the behavior of a nuclear reactor. So you say, hey computer, I guess that this nuclear reactor configuration will work. And it says, okay, let's load in this geometry. And if you're good at 3D modeling, you can basically build a reactor, okay? Mm-hmm. You load it into this program that does a Monte Carlo simulation, and it rolls the dice and says, generate neutrons randomly throughout the volume, going in all these different ways and at different energies. Then let's look at what they behave like and what neutrons they end up causing to be generated. And you iterate through these simulations like tens of thousands of times, right?
Right.
And eventually you get like these patterns that emerge out of that geometry, right? Like you can't directly calculate it. You have to like throw neutron background noise at it and say, what would this configuration become like in its steady state?
Right. So let's dive in. There's a couple things I want to ask about here. Can you point us in the direction of a specific open source tool that you would use to start simulating nuclear reactions?
There's a version of Linux called CAE Linux that actually comes with a lot of the tools that you would need for that. And then there's I think the specific one is like OpenMC is really nice. That's Open
Monte Carlo. And the next thing I wanted to ask you was about Monte Carlo simulations, because I have a cursory understanding of what they are, but they're also extremely useful and relevant. I mean, they're being used all over the place in like artificial intelligence and machine learning. So can you talk?
Yeah. It's a way to so there's some kind of structure, but I don't know what the behavior, the resulting behavior of this structure. So I want to give it some noise and see what it results in.
Yeah, I think that they used Monte Carlo simulations actually for the AI that beat the Go player.
Yes.
The Google AI, right? If you read that white paper, I think they were using a Monte Carlo simulation to basically figure out the optimal next move.
Okay.
Talk to me. So essentially, if I wanted to get started in this at home, I'd be doing it on a computer. Is there not a
No, sorry. You want to get Serpent. Yeah. This is the one done by the Finnish guy. This one can do both light water reactors and regular reactors. The website is Monte Carlo, MonteCarlo.vtt.fi.
Okay.
It's done by this guy. Starts with a J.
Don't worry about it. What we can do is we'll add a link in the show notes. So feel free to name drop all these things, and I will do the research to pull up the links in the show notes.
Cool.
So we've got some open source tools, Monte Carlo simulators, a CAE build of Linux, OpenMC for the Monte Carlo, Serpent, which is for reactors. You made a distinction.
It is truly amazing to think of the layman with very basic tools in about a year of his own time can simulate nuclear reactors, can design them in his own home, and the mathematical tools that we have are very reliable. I mean, you don't necessarily have to know all of the background physics to be able to get with your nuclear engineering buddy down the road. I mean, this field is actually been kind of shat on by the American political and economic system for the past 40 years. And so it's amazing how open these people are to trying to get their secrets and their tools out there. They want this nation to like buy in to a nuclear future, and it's really promising. I'd love to like teach kids how to do this stuff in high school. I think you really could. It'd be a badass elective course.
Well, so I love this idea because one suggestion that's come up for the podcast is to do project episodes where maybe we spend, a few hours just like getting it spun up, and just demonstrating maybe on in a video format how to get started. And so maybe you and I could do that down the road, actually, and we could teach high school students how to do that.
And like there's other people that I'll be able to recommend and bring on, like John Shatke's great nuclear design guy. You can like, these tools are easy to use once you know how to. I'll talk to him and we'll like brainstorm and like, what do you think about this design? And it's fun, man. But that being said, like, there's going to be an amazing future where we actually build these tools into like virtual reality interfaces. And, I can't wait until I'm not at a laptop designing these things. I want to be like in a headset in a virtual world where I have like my virtual trowel and my virtual like build it gun.
Yeah.
And like be putting pipes and stuff together on these things. It's Sorry, spurging out about the future.
No, I'm super excited too. I mean, I have an HTC Vive and like a really heavy duty gaming rig like in the other room, and I would love to start experimenting with prototyping some of these ideas that you're talking about. I do want to take it from like the theoretical simulation into the real world, though. What is the smallest nuclear reactor that you could conceive of, and what, like theoretically, how could we start, thinking about putting one in my backyard?
Okay, so you can absolutely do that, right? Like, back in the early days of nuclear, they actually had laboratories where they'd build very small, high purity cores, where they were trying to determine the critical masses of things in order to make bombs, right? Yeah. So they'd take really highly enriched uranium and highly enriched plutonium and other things, and they'd, you can get cores that are, centimeters, 10 centimeters, 20 centimeters across, especially if I put like reflectors and other things around them and shield them. The quality of these fuels is so high that they really become a political risk. I can have large reactors that make a lot of heat for civilian purposes by putting like certainly fairly low quality fuels inside of them. But I need a lot of this low quality fuel in a big configuration to bring enough good uranium into a space. If I have something that's like 99% enriched, I can just use like a really tiny amount.
Where do I find 99% enriched uranium? Where can I find a small 99% enriched uranium core?
In a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is in order to do this at home, I have to like go to Russia or the Eastern Russia, Eastern Europe,
like
and buy one of these.
Smallest. It'd be nice if you could like. I think if I could get some maybe 50 or 60% enriched, and that's like it's not weapons grade. I mean, you could build a bomb, but the bomb would be like maybe the size of a small vehicle, and so like I don't think like. People build weapons that you put on missiles and shoot each other with like the super high quality stuff. Right. I really think you could build reasonable small civilian nuclear reactors with like 40% enriched. You could probably have something about the size of your desk that would power easily your entire like neighborhood.
Well, so this
like
is
beyond that, like your neighborhood and a couple of factories. Yeah. Like that in like a small steam turbine.
Yeah.
You could probably fit like in a barn.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you could get a barn and dig a hole in the bottom of it, you could put
I have one
nuclear steam generator.
Yeah.
But you'd need good fuel, and that's the thing is like our nation is so paranoid about using nuclear energy that even these simple things we can't do. I know people are going to say, what about Fukushima? What about 3 Mile Island? What about Chernobyl? It's like, truth be told, these aren't that bad. I mean, yes, Chernobyl killed like 49 people out of the thousands that went in the building after the nuclear reactor blowed up in the building, right? Like the amazing thing is how many people survived. What's more is we now know that an additional like 2 to 4,000 thyroid cancers likely occurred as the fallout of that. I mean, thyroid cancers are bad, but they're not like super fatal.
Well,
right?
they're not like global warming, right?
Right,
Like,
right, and so that's that.
yeah.
Whereas like fossil fuels kill millions of people every year, and it's like
It's
there's
it's
there's
absurd.
just
It's
no
like 8
like
million
perceptions
people.
of risk.
It's like
And
8 million people a year die from pollution every year.
right,
And
like the thing is, no one's really calculating and saying like if you had huge amounts of energy that wasn't harmful to the environment, what good things could you do to prevent like other human and environmental suffering? I mean, like that's like uncountable, right? Like who knows? I mean, technically with enough energy, you could like heal everyone, kind of, sort of. I mean, you could do so much for quality of life and improving the quality of life and the environment simultaneously, right? Like there's a lot of work to be done, man. This generation has to get up off its ass and like there's we got to organize fast.
yeah.
Like time, money, people. I'm busting butt, you know, and I get the feeling that this message hopefully goes out to others that are also motivated somewhat similarly.
Well, and I want to give them the optimism to think to themselves, like I live, I'm here on a small farm, 12 acres. It's in the middle of suburban Maryland. So I'm thinking to myself, well, how do I power the farm? Right? Is there a way that I could use this, 40% enriched uranium, which it sounds like I could hypothetically get access to a sizable amount of 40% enriched uranium, not weapons grade, but energy grade. Is that possible?
I mean,
Where do you
like,
get this?
not like there is enough risk, I think, that some small terrorist group or some small malicious actor can get through, like the security that would be required for you to deploy that where you are, I think would probably break the economics of that. You would be better off if you didn't want to be connected to the grid. Certainly the best situation is to have a nuclear power plant, and that provides power for the state, right? Like I think one power plant per state ends up being a pretty reliable situation. Maybe you can have like two, but you just have like extra capacity at that power plant and you have a good power transmission system. Okay, now imagine you don't have a power grid. You're still probably better off having one large nuclear power plant next to the ocean, turning seawater and air into fuel, right? Taking carbon dioxide and hydrogen from the water and making hydrocarbons with it, like dimethyl ether, right? You would be better off running your society off of making fuel with air and water at a nuclear plant and transporting that fuel to generators at people's houses than you would be from digging like the coal and oil out of the ground.
So talk me through this scenario, because this sounds different. Like in my mind, I see.
Right, but you would, if you really wanted to power with like localized power, which I'm not saying is the optimal solution, right? But like if you do value your ability to be reliable in the event of like infrastructure meltdown, your best bet is to have like large amounts of fuel or to have some way to obtain fuel. I don't know, like what situation would you need your own personal nuclear reactor? You got to justify that, man. Like the value proposition has to be
I'm
there.
more curious from just a building standpoint, right? Like I have no real reason to get off the grid other than saving money, on my electric bill every month. But
Well, you're not going to save money on your electric bill with a personal nuclear reactor.
Right.
I think reactors, they have to be large. Well, so like imagine an ideal world where you don't need a security force, and like I was actually allowed to just bury a cargo container with this little personal steam generator. Like, so what's the selling point? Okay, so I could see the selling point.
You could sell power to
like,
the neighborhood.
Yeah, so basically I can bury something in the ground and I can hook it up to a turbine on the surface, and it guarantees that my neighborhood will have electricity for like the next 40 years.
For for the upfront cost of doing the work and maintaining it.
Right, and maybe it doesn't need too much maintenance.
Okay, so it is hypothetically feasible, right? And
Yeah,
I'm a
no,
pacifist, right? Like I'm curious strictly for
it's
energy
doable with
purposes.
the existing reactor technology. I mean, it's fairly well known. I'm not really revealing any secrets here, but how do aircraft carriers and submarines work, right? They have reactors that last for the life of the ship, and it's like a little thing, that would fit in a cargo container, and it heats and it makes heat as needed. So this is you can totally do it now, and you could probably mass produce them and make them fairly inexpensive now.
Do you have? You said you're not revealing any secrets. What are the secrets? Can you tell me
So,
a secret?
so like how the Navy makes their fuel is really a no discussion land, right?
Do you know?
So there's general principles around small nuclear reactors that can last for long periods of time, but there's some specific things that you have to design for to get reactors capable of that. But like for civilian use and naval use, you're going to have some different design cases. So I'd feel comfortable saying what would be that kind of reactor for civilian use. And you don't necessarily need to design it like something that isn't a boat that floats has all these different design issues.
Right.
And so in the Navy's super smart. You would never ever want to like make the Navy mad. I love you, Navy.
Yeah, we love the Navy. We love all the government institutions that have guns. We, okay, so it's feasible potentially to do this. Big problem is getting the fuel and fuel quality. It sounds like there is some sort of source of like medium quality, low quality fuel out there.
Well, so there's downblending, right? For a while we were doing this.
What is downblending?
You take high quality nuclear fuel, you blend it with low quality, and you make medium quality. It's kind of like gasoline and octane ratings, right? So you have your natural uranium, which is 0.7% enriched. Then you have weapons grade, which is above 95% enriched. You have different civilian reactors normally operate at 5% or less, right? Somewhere around there. But the limit, the accepted international limit for civilian fuels is like 20%. So you can't, if you have above 20%, then that's no good.
Where can I get uranium on that low end? Like if I just want to get like a shoebox full.
Kazakhstan?
I go to Kazakhstan, I can buy
Yeah.
some. What is like the going rate for 5% enriched uranium?
Oh man. Per kilogram, less than $5,000, more than $500.
All right, so a few $1,000, I could get a shoebox full of, civilian.
So kilograms. So then you have to say, well, what's my reactor design? Yeah, you could probably get by with around five to 10 million bucks of uranium would probably be your fuel for your community for the next 40 years. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say I've raised the money. Okay, I've got the uranium.
But on top of that, you have to have the steel tank that goes around it. I have to have little control rods and da 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 da.
Sure.
And you have to shield the thing, right? Like an operating nuclear reactor needs to be pretty deep in the ground, at least 3 or 4 meters.
Why?
So that the radiation. So the radiation that comes off of the reactor needs to be shielded, right? Gamma rays and neutrons and stuff. But that's not too hard to do. We know how to design shielding, right?
Yeah.
You just do it.
So I've spent $10 million, okay? I've built, or $20 million, let's say. I've built a miniature reactor. I've got some low-grade civilian uranium fuel. I built the reactor. Now I'm powering my house and my neighborhood with this. What are, the security precautions? What am I protecting? And, like what am I protecting in that?
So like some jerk bag is going to want to come in there and put a bomb next to your reactor core, just a regular chemical bomb. And so what they'll do, if they can blow a hole in your reactor and like they'll be able to spread radioactive materials outside of your reactor, right? Okay. That's called a dirty bomb, right?
And what's the fallout from that? Given the small reactor case.
So, right, uranium splits and it becomes all these fission products. And these fission products, a lot of them are radioactive. And so they're all decaying away. And so some of the ones that have really short half-lives are actually the source of the strongest radiation initially, right? So iodine 131 and cesium 135 or something, you know, those are these really major isotopes that people are really concerned about, right? But like iodine has a half-life of 8 days. So after 16 days, 25% is left.
And what's the radius on this? Like, if with a small reactor, how far away do I need to be safe?
Okay, so in what situation? During operation, or if like someone has like blown it up?
So both operation, both operation and then blown it up. Yeah.
So I would say during operation.
And again, small reactor. Like this is in my barn.
Right, small reactor. Okay. Yeah. So I have my small reactor, and it's probably, call it a meter across. Yep. All right. Like a cylinder, maybe 1 meter tall, 1 meter in diameter. Yep. Right. That's in a big steel tank. Right. That's in like a big bucket of water. That's in another steel wall. That's in a concrete casket, and that whole thing is maybe
the size of a shipping container.
Right. That's your silo, and that goes 4 meters under the ground. Okay. So I cap that off, and I have a boiler on top of that, or a steam drum, and that steam drum is feeding one big turbine that's maybe 50 megawatts or something. And then you'll need a little cooling tower, or if you built it next to a river, you could take cooling water from the river and use that to keep the reactor to condense the reactor steam water, right? Okay. So what do I want to do for operating? So during operation, I would say that you could probably put some lead sheets around it and maybe have like maybe a lead sheet above the reactor. That would save a lot of space, but I don't know, it's kind of arguable whether that would be less expensive than maybe just digging a deeper hole and putting more dirt around it.
Yeah.
Depending on how concerned you are about like radiating worms, you don't have to put, like if you bury it in the...
What do you mean by radiating worms? Like murdering the worms, or like the worms?
Well, I mean, so like the worm would probably kind of wiggle close towards it and then be like, ooh, this stings, and it would wiggle away.
But then you've got a radioactive worm.
You know, at a certain distance near the reactor, you would actually have beneficial effects from the radiation. I could imagine that, like, maybe you would have some really big worms growing out there.
Oh, okay. So basically, mutations happening and some like accelerated.
Radiation does tend to accelerate growth in general. It's kind of like it kills off the weak cells.
Yeah.
And lets your stronger body cells survive. So just don't get too much of it all at once, right?
Okay. So maybe you're digging a deep hole. In operation, you could have this reactor, 4 or 5 meters under the ground, and you could be, walking around the turbine on top of it, and you wouldn't be getting radiation poisoning. Right.
Well, I mean, the water, you'd want to kind of, the turbine would be in a concrete room. Mm-hmm. The water itself, the oxygen in the water can become a radioactive form of nitrogen, and that releases a gamma ray. And so you need a little bit of shielding around like the turbine and things while it's operating. But when you shut the reactor down, then that radiation dies away quickly. And the only thing that's radioactive is the reactor core itself.
Okay. So
there's
the turbine...
there's like the water I circulate through the reactor
is radioactive.
The reactor has particles that can kind of activate other things.
Yeah.
So after 40 years of operation, this of the reactor itself would be somewhat radioactive too, right?
Okay. So you can't
But
get too close to the turbine. You can't get too close to the water.
while it's operating.
While it's
right.
operating, like how close? Like 5 meters, 100 meters?
It depends on what's between you and the turbine, right?
Yeah.
It can be concrete, steel, water. It purely depends on the weight of it, right?
Yeah.
So this is why lead is good shielding for gammas, right? Lead is really heavy per volume of material, but it's also expensive, right? You'd probably just want to keep your turbine maybe next to the reactor underground too. Like everything kind of at ground level or below is easy. So think of maybe a tiny building with a basement where the reactor and the turbine is, and I have like a thick concrete floor above that.
Yep.
And then maybe I have a crane in the building above it, and I can move sections of the concrete out of the way to like repair the turbine or repair the reactor as needed. You know, you could, it's reasonable. And a lot of nuclear reactors early on were pretty much like this. I mean, there were tens, hundreds of them built across America. You can go explore them.
Now,
I went and checked out one in Arkansas. It was kind of fun.
in the event of a breach, what is the radius, like the affected radius?
It depends on the kind of breach. A lot of reactors can have little vents and valves on them that might blow down into maybe a drum filled with sand that's designed to absorb the radioactive stuff. And like it really depends. Like if somebody really wants to like screw your day, then there's no real way to like stop them from putting a big enough bomb next to you. That's why reactors have big fences around them, right?
So worst case scenario, you have a massive breach. This radioactive material is leaking everywhere. Are we talking, 1 mile kill zone?
Leaking everywhere isn't a good term.
Exploding
so what is
everywhere.
Radioactive material? It's these rods of oxide. So let's imagine a hole is breached in the reactor, and these oxide rods are just exposed to the air, right?
Yeah.
The water has drained away, so they're probably still radioactive and hot. You wouldn't want to get near them. They're heating up. The air that is touching them is cooling them down. If they get too hot, they kind of melt into this mass of like liquid oxides, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty radioactive substance. But what normally happens is it reacts with the air and kind of forms a crust on the outside. And then in the middle, it might stay liquid, sort of like lava, right? I mean, It's pretty much nuclear lava. And so, it'll kind of sit there. Water can leach some radioactive things out of it. If it kind of gets stuck in like the concrete shell or the steel shell, then it's pretty benign. Just don't get close to it.
So even in the worst case scenario where someone drops like a bunch of C4 on your, your building where you've got the nuclear reactor and the turbine and everything, and like worst case scenario, they really get you good, and you've got these liquid oxides everywhere.
Right. So it would basically be something where you'd want to give it at least 5 years before sending in people with like big hazmat suits to clean it up.
Yeah.
But it's not going to make like the entire area around uninhabitable. It'll just be like the radiation that gets out will make things slightly more radioactive for a while.
How far what distance would be affected? By our shipping containers?
Maybe 5 miles would be a extent of like a really zone of like real concern. Not to say like depending on wind conditions and stuff and whatever gets blown into the air, right? You'll probably have like a little spread line where something has spread out.
So if this happens and you're within a mile,
up, right? It did kill trees kind of in a fan pattern upwind of the reactor, but they're alive again now.
Yeah.
So
essentially, if you're like anywhere within a mile of this when it happens, you're dead?
No, not really. It depends. What are you absorbing? You're absorbing radioiodine or radiocesium. If you make sure to have enough calcium and iodine in your diet already, you're not going to absorb these aerosolized radioactive particles, right?
Yeah.
But the sad fact is the majority of Americans are iodine and calcium deficient. Eat spinach, people, spinach and fish. Don't fuck around. Your diet matters, especially in nuclear scenarios.
Really?
But,
Okay, so this is fascinating because I don't think anybody knows this. Can you talk about how diet...
no, that people know this. Alex Jones was selling some iodine pills when people were freaking out about Fukushima. But really,
I've never
you
heard
didn't
this.
need iodine pills because of Fukushima. I mean, that's all the freaking way across the Pacific Ocean. I mean, chill out.
Yeah. Okay,
Anyway.
So realistically, with enough money, we could build a small nuclear reactor in my backyard that would power the whole neighborhood for 40 or 50 years, and the upfront investment would be between $10 and $20 million.
Yeah, I mean, it's reasonable. That's like, what did the first research reactors that they built in America cost? About that much, and they were about that scale. I mean, what you're asking for is not some fantasy. This is technology that Americans regularly built in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and very early 70s. I mean, it's just like we can do these things. Let's make America nuclear again.
Yeah. Man up. Let's make America nuclear again. I love that. I'm going to make that the title of the podcast. Make America nuclear again.
I think I probably got to run and help out with some notes here. We didn't even get halfway through that list of questions.
No, we really just talked about this one thing, the do-it-yourself nuclear, which is the most interesting thing, and I actually want to have a follow-up conversation. I think that we should do a part 2 at some point. I'll give you the last word. I would love for you to tell the audience where they can find you if you want to be found online, for example, and to make an ask to the audience so that they can go do something or think about something after they listen to this show.
Okay, where can I be found? Where can I be found inoffensively? My email is best. andrewmdodson@gmail.com.
Gotcha. And do you have an ask for the audience? Anything you want them to do?
Ask. I ask that, okay, so these are people that have projects. Tell me, like I want you to come figure out for yourself where in the for your project, strongly consider this week where in the project life cycle you are and what person you're playing in that role, right? Are you in a conceptual stage, a development stage, a production stage, a utilization stage? Are you supporting your idea being used? Are you retiring something and moving the product on to the next stage, right? What are you playing in that life cycle? Are you a research manager driving a concept? Are you a systems engineer developing a product? Who's producing your product? I want some people to write back in. I want to hear what's the stage of your project and what role you're playing.
So write to Andrew at andrewmdodson@gmail.com and tell him what you're working on, what you are specifically doing on the project, and where the project is in its life cycle.
Right. I have a lot of sticks in the fire, and I could use some people to help. I got some opportunities back in Missouri and whatever, and I like people that, or like maybe what roles do you like to play in that life cycle, right? Why do you like to play them? All right, man. I'm gonna run.
Awesome, Andrew M. Dodson. Thank you so much, sir, and have a great rest of your day.
Hey everybody, a few things before you go. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you learned something new today. That's why we are here, to help each other learn. If you enjoyed the show, if you learned something, please hit that subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you are listening to the episode. If you really loved the episode, or you just like me, please leave a review on iTunes, because that will get us to the top of the charts and get us in front of more people, and we can help more people learn about the cutting edge of these different fields that we talk about. Thirdly, if you did love the episode, or if you didn't. I want to hear why, and I want to have a dialogue with you, a back and forth. So if you would like to leave me some feedback, I would really appreciate it. You can do that at hackerpractice.com. That's hackerpractice.com. We cannot wait to hear from you. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a great rest of your day.